As the fire crackles and the stars twinkle overhead, let me take you on a journey to a world lost beneath the waves, where legends of wisdom and wonder still echo. Picture it now. Columns of white marble rising from an ocean floor, fish drifting through empty doorways, and somewhere, deep in the silt, a city that once taught the world how to dream. No one has ever found it, but the old stories keep it alive. Welcome to Stories Under the Stars. Settle in, the fire's still warm. The embers are low, the night is soft, and there's nowhere else to be. Tonight's story is an old one, older than most of the books we still read. It begins with a Greek philosopher named Plato, nearly 2,400 years ago, writing of an island empire far out in the Atlantic. He called it Atlantis. He said it had rings of sea and rings of land, bridges and temples, and a people who once walked among the gods. Then, in a single day and night, he wrote, the sea rose up and took it all. Whether Atlantis was real, no one knows for certain. But for thousands of years, sailors, dreamers, and storytellers have returned to its shores in their imaginations. Tonight, so will we. Imagine you're standing at the edge of a harbor, long, long ago. The sun is just beginning to set, and the water is the color of polished copper. Behind you, the city rises in terraces of stone and bronze, each ring circling the next, like ripples frozen in place. This is the capital of Atlantis, as Plato described it. At the very center, on a small hill, stood the temple of Poseidon, the god of the sea. They say its walls were covered in silver, its roof in gold, and inside stood a statue so tall its head brushed the ceiling, the god himself, driving 6-winged horses through an imagined sky. Around the temple, rings of water circled rings of land, each connected by bridges wide enough for chariots. Ships could sail from the open ocean directly into the heart of the city through a deep canal, passing beneath towers of white, black, and red stone. The walls shimmered, the old stories say, because the Atlanteans had polished them with a metal called orichalcum, a substance that gleamed like fire, which no one has ever been able to identify. Fountains ran with both hot and cold water. Gardens grew on every level, and the air, it was said, smelled always of salt and orange blossom. The fire crackles, and somewhere in the dark beyond, a branch settles. Imagine now the sound of that distant city, the creak of ropes against docks, the slow beat of oars, voices drifting across water in a language no one has spoken in 10,000 years. The Atlanteans were, in these stories, the happiest people in the world. They wanted for nothing. Their fields gave 2 harvests a year. Their mountains held every metal, every gemstone. Their kings ruled wisely, and for a long, long time, they were content simply to live, gently, beautifully, beneath the warm sun of an ocean that had not yet learned to be cruel. Plato tells us that Atlantis was founded by Poseidon himself. The god, walking the young earth, had fallen in love with a mortal woman named Cleito, who lived on a small green hill at the center of a fertile plain. To protect her, he raised rings of sea and land around the hill so that no one could reach her without his blessing. From their union came 10 sons, and from those 10 sons, 10 royal lines that would rule the island for generations. The eldest was named Atlas, and it is from him that the ocean itself takes its name, the Atlantic. Even now, every time we speak of that ocean, we are speaking the name of a prince from a story older than history. The 10 kings ruled their 10 kingdoms, but they met often, the legend goes, in the great temple at the center. There, beneath the golden roof, they would exchange vows. They would hunt a sacred bull, using only nooses and wooden staves, never weapons of bronze. They would pour its blood upon a pillar inscribed with their ancient laws, and they would promise, each to the others, to judge fairly, to rule gently, and never to make war upon their own kin. For many generations, they kept that promise. They built their cities, they wrote their books, they studied the stars and the tides and the languages of birds. They sent their ships to every shore, to Egypt, to Spain, to the green islands of the far north, trading in wool and wine and ideas. The fire settles, and the stars above haven't changed in 10,000 years. The same stars the Atlanteans would have watched, if they ever existed, drifting slow across the same patient sky. They were, for a while, as close to paradise as anyone has ever been. But paradise, the old stories always remind us, is never the end of the tale. It is only the beginning. For generations, the divine blood in the veins of the Atlantean kings ran strong, and they remained humble. They wore simple robes. They walked among their people. They thought of their gold and orichalcum the way we think of autumn leaves: beautiful, plentiful, nothing to hoard. But time, the storytellers say, thins everything, even the blood of gods. Slowly, so slowly no one noticed, the descendants of Atlas grew less wise than their grandfathers had been. The temples grew larger, the feasts grew longer. The ships, once sent out with gifts, began to return with tribute. The kings began to want. They wanted more land, more cities to call their own, more peoples to bow as they passed. Their armies, which had been small and ceremonial, grew into something vast and glittering and hungry. Legend has it, they crossed the sea eastward, conquering the shores of the Mediterranean one kingdom at a time, until only a single city stood against them. Ancient Athens, small and brave, whose soldiers, Plato says, held the line for all the free peoples of the world. And the gods watched. Zeus watched, and he was not pleased. The fire crackles softly, and somewhere an owl calls, patient and low. It is easy, isn't it, to feel how the story turns here, the way every good story turns, when a people forget what they were given and begin to believe they took it for themselves. The Atlanteans no longer hunted the sacred bull with nooses. They no longer met beneath the golden roof to renew their vows. The pillar of laws gathered dust. The promise, once so bright, grew dim, and in the deep places of the sea, in the trenches where light never reaches, where even now no human has traveled, something old began to stir. Something patient. Something that had been waiting all along to remind them what they truly were. Small, mortal, borrowed from the earth, and returning to it soon. Came, Plato wrote, in a single day and a single night. A day of earthquakes so violent that the mountains themselves seemed to breathe. A night of rain that fell in sheets of silver, and a sea that rose, not in waves but as a wall. The canal gates shattered. The bronze-tipped towers groaned. The temple of Poseidon, with its roof of gold and its silver walls, tilted like a ship in a storm. The people ran. Some climbed to the high places, some took to their boats. But the water came faster than any of them, and the island, which had stood for 10,000 years, slipped quietly beneath the surface of the sea, as if it had never been there at all. In the morning, the storytellers say, the sun rose on an empty ocean, no spires, no smoke from morning fires, no ships, only blue, only silence, only the soft lapping of a sea that had learned, at last, to be cruel. The fire crackles, and a small ember drifts up into the dark. Watch it go. Imagine that some part of Atlantis rose with it. A voice, a song, a breath of orange blossom, carried up into the stars, where no sea could reach it. Sailors, for centuries after, claimed they saw towers beneath their boats in the deep water off the African coast. Greek divers brought up coins of no known mint. Medieval maps placed the island just beyond the edge of the known world, marked with the words "Here be wonders." And even now, ships cross that ocean every day, passing above who knows what, their sonar pings disappearing into the black. Perhaps there is nothing down there. Perhaps Plato invented it all to teach a lesson about pride. Or perhaps, every so often, on a night when the sea is very still, you could lean over the rail of a ship and hear something faint, far below. A bell, maybe. A voice. The memory of a promise, still waiting to be kept. Picture it, if you can, from above. A circle of calm water where a city had been. A ring of foam where mountains had stood. Seabirds wheeling over a sea that did not yet know it had swallowed a kingdom. And below, the slow descent of everything a civilization had ever made. The great bronze walls, green with salt, drifting downward through the blue. Orichalcum columns spiraling into the dark like embers falling the wrong way. Marble horses from the temple of Poseidon, still rearing, still proud, settling at last into beds of sand. Fountains that had poured hot and cold water for 1,000 years now poured only silence. Gardens where golden fruit had hung from silver branches, now swayed with kelp and pale anemones. The theaters where children had laughed. The harbors where ships had nosed in from distant shores, their holds full of ivory, cinnamon, tin, all of it drifting down, down, into that green, unhurried dark where the sun does not reach. The story goes that the gods themselves watched this happen. That Poseidon, who had raised the island for love, lowered his trident and let the waters take it back. not in rage, some of the old tellers say. In sorrow, in the way a father finally turns his face away from a child who will not listen. And the sea, they say, closed over Atlantis without a seam. The waves met and rolled on. Within a week, there was nothing on the surface to show that anything had ever been there at all. A few floating timbers, a sandal, a painted bowl turning slowly in a current. Then nothing. Imagine for a moment the quiet that follows a thing like that. The sea, which had been broken open, now whole again. The stars, which had watched the city for 10,000 years, wheeling on through the night as if nothing had changed. Somewhere far away, the first fishermen waking before dawn, pushing their boats into the water, not yet knowing that a world had ended while they slept. And here, at our small fire, the coals settle with a soft sound. A log shifts. The night presses in gently around us. The story is old, older than most stories, but it is patient. It has waited a long time to be told, and it can take its time in the telling. Now, for a long time after Plato wrote down what he had heard, no one knew quite what to do with the story. It was too strange to be history, too detailed to be myth. A few of the old philosophers argued over it. Aristotle, Plato's own student, is said to have shrugged and murmured that the man who made Atlantis was the same man who unmade it, meaning perhaps that his teacher had simply invented the whole thing as a lesson about pride. But other scholars were not so sure. There were those measurements after all. The canals, the bridges, the distances in stadia, the mention of a mountain range to the north and a great plain to the south, the careful note that the island lay beyond the Pillars of Heracles, which is what the Greeks called the strait we now call Gibraltar. That is a great deal of geography for a parable. And so, over the centuries, the story did not die. It drifted. Like those timbers on the empty sea, it was carried from century to century, picked up, set down, carried again. Medieval monks copied it. Renaissance philosophers pored over it by candlelight. Sailors, sailing into waters no European had ever seen, would whisper the name to themselves when the fog came down. When the New World was discovered, some were certain that the Americas were Atlantis, risen again from the sea. When ruins were found beneath the Mediterranean, beneath the Atlantic, beneath the ice of Antarctica, each one in its turn was said to be the lost city. The story, it seems, wants to be found. It keeps offering itself up in new shapes. There is something in us, isn't there, that cannot quite let it go. The idea that a whole world might lie just beneath the surface of ours. That if we could only dive deep enough, sail far enough, listen carefully enough, we might hear the bronze bells of Atlantis still ringing under the waves. The fire crackles. A small flame lifts, then settles. The smoke curls up through the branches and loses itself among the stars. And the story, patient as ever, goes on unfolding. No one knows for certain where it ends. Perhaps that is why it has lasted so long. Perhaps that is why, even now, it is so gentle a thing to fall asleep to. Let us go back, then, back to the island as it was, before the waters came. Close your eyes, if they are not already closed, and let the picture form slowly, the way a dream forms, without hurry, without effort. You are standing on a low hill at the edge of the Great Plain. Behind you, the mountains rise, dark with forests of pine and cedar. Before you, the land slopes gently down toward the sea, laid out in a patchwork of orchards and fields. The air smells of warm earth and blossom. Somewhere out of sight, a stream is running over stones, and in the distance, at the center of it all, the city itself. Imagine 3 rings of water, perfect circles, one inside the next, each one wider than the last. Between the rings, 3 rings of land, planted with gardens, crossed by bridges. At the very heart, on a small round island, stands the Acropolis, and on the Acropolis, the Temple of Poseidon, its walls sheathed in silver, its pinnacles in gold. From here, in the soft light of late afternoon, it looks like a jewel set carefully into the green palm of the island. Ships are coming in through the long canal that leads from the sea to the innermost harbor. You can just make out their striped sails. Smaller boats move between the rings, ferrying people from one circle to the next. On the outermost ring, the racecourse runs all the way around the city, a full circle, where horses have raced since anyone can remember. You cannot hear the crowd from here, only a faint, far-off murmur, like the sound of a seashell held to the ear. The sun is beginning to lower. The gold on the temple catches fire. The water in the rings turns to beaten copper. Birds are flying home to the cliffs. Somewhere in the city, a single bell rings once, clear and unhurried, and then is quiet. This is the island as it was. Not yet fallen, not yet forgotten. Just a place where people lived and loved and went about the small and ordinary business of being alive. The wind moves softly through the grass at your feet. The fire behind you, wherever it is, crackles gently on. And you are here, for this moment, watching the light go long across a world that will one day be a story. Walk with me down from the hill. The path is soft underfoot, worn smooth by generations of feet. On either side, olive trees lean their silver leaves toward the light. A goat lifts its head to watch you pass, then goes back to its grazing. Somewhere a child is laughing, and somewhere else a woman is singing as she walks with a jar balanced on her shoulder. These are the small sounds of an afternoon that has ended and begun 10,000 times. You cross the outer bridge. The water beneath it is green and slow. Fish drift in the shadows of the piers, long-bodied and lazy. On the bridge itself, merchants have set up small stalls under striped awnings. Figs, honey, bread still warm from the oven, cloth dyed in colors you do not have names for. No one hurries. No one calls out. The day has the shape of a day that will be followed by another like it, and another, and another. Past the second bridge, the city begins in earnest. The houses here are built of stone, white stone, black stone, and a strange red stone that they quarry, the story goes, from beneath the island itself. The three stones together give the walls a warm, patterned look, like the back of a tortoise, like the markings of some gentle animal. Fountains play at every crossroads. The sound of water is everywhere. You realize slowly that you have not heard a harsh sound since you entered the city. No shouting, no clashing of metal, only voices and water and the soft clap of sandals on warm stone. And in the distance, rising above the rooftops, the temple of Poseidon. Its great bronze doors stand open. Inside, the old stories say, a statue of the god held the reins of 6-winged horses, and around him 100 sea nymphs rode on dolphins, and the whole of the ceiling was ivory, inlaid with gold and silver, and that strange red metal, or a chalcum, that shone with a light like fire. But we will not go inside today. Not yet. Let the doors stand open. Let the light lie warm on the threshold. Let the city keep its evening for a little while longer. The fire here burns low, the night is kind, and there is more of the story still to come. At the heart of the city, there was a temple. Not grand in the way we picture grand today, all towers and spires reaching up to pierce the sky. This one was low and broad, set upon a platform of pale stone, and its roof was covered in something that caught the light like the scales of a fish. Plato called it orichalcum, a metal the ancients said shone with a reddish glow, somewhere between copper and gold. No one alive today knows for certain what it was, or if it ever existed at all, but close your eyes and picture it. A roof that seems to hold the last warmth of the sun long after the sun has gone. Inside the temple, the air was cool, and there was the smell of cedar smoke and salt. Offerings lay on low altars, small carvings of dolphins, braided cords of seagrass, bowls of honey, and at the far end of the long hall, there stood the figure of a man in a chariot, drawn by 6-winged horses, carved so cleverly that in the wavering lamplight the horses seemed to breathe. This, the story says, was Poseidon, the god who had loved a mortal woman long ago and whose children had built this place, and whose blood still ran thin and quiet in the veins of the kings who ruled here. 10 kings, all told. Brothers and cousins, the descendants of those first 5 pairs of twins. Each one ruled his own portion of the island. Each one answered only to the High King, who ruled from the central city on the hill, and every few years they would gather here, in this temple, to renew the old laws. Imagine it. The torches lit, the kings in their long robes, standing in a circle, the sound of the sea somewhere beyond the walls, patient, constant. A sound that does not change, whether kings rise or kings fall. The same sound you might hear now if you listened past the soft crackle of the fire, past the wind in the branches overhead. The sea, remembering, the fire shifts, an ember drops, somewhere far off, a night bird calls once and is silent. Renewing of the laws was a quiet ceremony. Not the kind of thing you would expect if you imagined kings. There were no trumpets, no crowds, just the 10 of them, and a few priests and the long night ahead. They would begin by catching a bull. The temple kept a small herd of them, sacred animals, allowed to wander the inner grounds untouched. The kings hunted with staves and loops of braided cord. No metal. That was the rule. Whatever blood was spilled that night had to come without the help of iron or bronze. It was slow work, and often they would be at it for hours, 10 grown men stalking through the moonlit courtyard, patient as herons. And when at last the bull was taken, they would bring it to a pillar of orichalcum that stood in the center of the hall, and there the old words would be spoken. Upon that pillar, the laws of Atlantis were written, laws older than any of them, laws that told the kings how to treat one another, never to make war upon a brother king, never to raise a hand against another unless the others agreed, to come to each other's aid if any were threatened. Simple things, the sort of things that seem obvious until power makes them difficult. And each king, in turn, would dip a cup into the offering and drink and pour a little onto the fire and swear again, as his father had sworn, and his father before him, that he would keep the old laws, that he would rule justly, that he would not let the gold of the mountains or the spice of the orchards or the cool wine of the hill country turn his heart away from what was right. They say the ceremony lasted until dawn. They say that when the first light came through the eastern doorway, the 10 kings would walk out of the temple together, blinking, tired, bound once more by the words they had spoken. And for a long time, a very long time, the old laws held. The fire crackles, the night listens, and the story goes on. Fire has burned low, and the stars are wheeling gently overhead. Somewhere, far from here, a wave is folding quietly onto a beach, and somewhere beneath that wave, if the old stories are true, a city sleeps. We may never find it. Perhaps we're not meant to. Some stories live longer when they stay just out of reach. What Atlantis leaves behind is not a map, but a gentle reminder to hold our gifts with open hands, to remember where they came from, to walk softly on the earth we've been given. The fire crackles one last time. The night is wide, and you, safe here, are ready to drift out over the quiet water, down past the light, into the soft blue dark where the story is still being told. If you'd like more quiet stories to drift off to, you can follow along. A new one waits here every night. The fire's yours now. Close your eyes. The story continues in your dreams. Stories under the stars, here, every night. Sleep well.